They called it a strategic future dinner. But anyone who's survived long enough in the corporate world knows a firing when they smell it, especially when it's served on a yacht with caviar and curated wine pairings. This story is for anyone who's ever been erased from the table they helped build, only to return holding the final move. Stay with me. I stood on the edge of the deck, Manhattan's skyline, glittering like a smokescreen behind me, and waited. A soft jazz quartet played inside. Waiters glided by with trays of oysters and compliments. And somewhere near the captain's table, Reed Callahan, our newly minted CEO, was smiling too wide. I wasn't supposed to be here tonight. The original invite was accidentally left off my calendar. It wasn't until my assistant noticed the guest list floating around Slack that I knew. And once I did, I made sure to show up on time in black satin with nothing to lose. I'd spent 17 years building the digital backbone of Stratus Metrics from scratch. When the company was bleeding from a securities breach, I held the line. When competitors tried to poach our contracts, I rewrote the infrastructure that kept us secure. I'd done it all quietly, without fanfare, without asking for a corner office. So when Reed raised his glass and introduced the company's next era, I already knew where it was going, but even I wasn't prepared for the twist. Everyone, he said, placing a hand on the shoulder of the young woman beside him. Meet Sienna Callahan, our new chief strategy architect, Sienna, his niece, fresh out of a Silicon Valley leadership boot camp. In a white power suit, not a single hair out of place, glowing like an ad campaign. She clinked her glass against his. Time for some fresh air around here. And then the line that told me everything. Ilara's been an incredible foundation, but now we build upward. I nodded politely, smiled, let them toast, let them laugh. Because what they didn't know, what they never once stopped to consider, was that the entire security framework they were toasting on still had my name etched into its bones. I came into the office early the next morning, earlier than usual. The place was still half asleep. Just the cleaning crew finishing up, and the lights humming their low mechanical tune. No announcement had been made yet. No farewell memo, just the faint shift in how people avoided my eyes. I said nothing. I walked the floor like always, coffee in hand, pausing at my glass-walled office, only to see that the nameplate was gone. The gesture was quiet. Efficient. Corporate, I stepped inside anyway, logged in. My credentials still worked for now. I didn't flinch. I knew better than to ask questions in rooms where the answers had already been decided. Instead, I opened the admin console, pulled access logs, and backed up every version of the security framework I'd written since 2011. I archived system protocols, downloaded internal correspondence, pulled contracts, then moved to the legacy server and did what I knew they'd forget to do. I revoked every hidden superuser credential I'd ever created. And then I left behind a gift. Not a virus. Nothing illegal, just proof, documentation of ownership, timestamped immutable, buried in a private developer node labeled simply Ilara V1, Zero Foundation. On my way out, I walked past the big monitor in the lobby where client logos rotated proudly. For a moment, I watched them flash by firms we'd secured through trust. Late nights, clean execution, names that meant something once, and then I stepped outside. The cold hit harder than I expected, even for October. I paused for a second, one breath, then kept walking. I didn't slam the door, didn't post a bitter farewell on LinkedIn. I didn't need to. Let them think I was done. Let them assume I walked out empty-handed. But the truth, I was walking away with more than they ever imagined. Not just the blueprints, not just the code, not even the 5% stake. I still quietly held. I was walking away with clarity and something they'd lost long ago. Leverage. It took 4 days. Just 4 days before the cracks began to show. Not dramatic ones, not headlines, but hairline fractures, the kind that spread slowly until the whole structure buckles under its own weight. The first came from Tokyo. An encrypted message from one of our oldest partners flagged an authentication failure in the client dashboard. Minor on the surface, But I knew that dashboard like the back of my hand, and it didn't break on its own. It broke when someone tinkered with back-end security tokens they didn't fully understand. By Friday afternoon, another email pinged, then another pattern system, latency vendor, integration failures, legacy encryption, rollback errors. None of it dangerous yet, but all of it familiar. I had spent the last decade holding that system together with discipline, not duct tape. Each tool was connected to a rule, each rule a reason. And now, with fresh vision at the helm, they were rearranging code like it was a Pinterest board. Sienna, in all her curated confidence, had hosted her first agile innovation sprint. Translation: 30 underpaid developers racing against artificial deadlines to impress a woman who had never built a single scalable system in her life. I watched from a distance. Literally from my home monitor, I could still observe portions of the public-facing code they deployed, and I saw it coming before they did. One of the modules, an open-source predictive plugin Sienna insisted they push, was flagged by 2 external partners for compliance concerns. Data misclassification, non-conformity with GDPR. They hadn't even tested it in Sandbox, but they still hadn't called me. Not yet. They thought it was fixable, thought the interns she brought in could Google their way through the mess. Let them try. Because problems like this don't start with crashes. They start with confidence, and nothing makes a system unravel faster than confidence in the wrong hands. So I waited. I went on with my days, cooked dinner, watered my plants, took long walks while news trickled through the wires. And the whole time I kept a single thought at the center of my mind. They don't even know yet where the real break is. The first emergency meeting was on a Tuesday, called hastily poorly attended. Sienna stood at the head of the table with a glossy slide deck titled Forward Reboot System Realignment. Half the room nodded, unsure of what they were agreeing to. The root issue, she blamed it on legacy friction. Translation: blame the architecture, not the architect. They hired outside consultants, flown in from Boston with buzzwords and frameworks that looked good on paper but collapsed under the actual infrastructure. Within days, new bugs appeared. Client access slowed. Some dashboards began returning null data. Meanwhile, no one mentioned my name. Not directly, but in the eyes of 2 senior managers, I saw it the brief flicker of, maybe we made a mistake. I didn't reach out. I didn't gloat. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table one night, staring at a ceramic mug from our launch year 2012 faded letters chipped edge. I remembered working till midnight for that first federal audit rewriting encryption layers while everyone else slept. My name had never been on the front page, but it was in every line of code they now tried to erase. And now they were scrambling. A patch here, a new hire there, a whole new data. Governance team formed in a week, but none of it worked, because you can't replace understanding with urgency. And that's all they had now. Panic dressed up in productivity metrics. On Thursday, a private client escalated a concern. One of the automated reports had misfired, sending classified trend data to the wrong recipient. The compliance team flagged it. Legal got involved. Still no one called me, but I knew the whispers had started. I could feel it, like pressure building inside a wall. Everyone pretending the paint wasn't cracking, while water seeped through the foundation. And behind all the noise, one truth stayed solid. You can't restructure what you don't understand. The first call came from HR. Polite, clipped with just enough concern to sound performative. We'd love to discuss a short-term advisory role, Alara, just to help stabilize things. You know, legacy knowledge and all that. I let her talk. The second call came from Reed himself. I let that one in, go to voicemail. Then came the email, subject line support during transition. Your insights matter. There it was. Not regret, not apology, just fear, lightly veiled in flattery. I didn't respond. I forwarded the email to a private folder labeled, When They Flinch that week. Sienna held another meeting, another presentation, another round of promises. But this time, the room wasn't nodding. This time, questions followed her slides, quiet ones at first, then more pointed. One manager asked if the recent compliance breach was an isolated event. Another inquired why back-end monitoring reports hadn't been sent out in over a week. Sienna brushed it off. but I knew the tone, knew the tightening jaw, the invisible line between certainty and unraveling. That weekend, I was in Chicago, meeting with the director of infrastructure at a major cloud services provider. We were collaborating on a pilot program I'd quietly joined just weeks after my departure. They didn't just want my input. They wanted me. By the time I got back home, another message waited. This time from Sienna, short casual. But I could hear the tension between the lines. Hope you're well, just wondering if you'd be open to grabbing coffee. I'd love to hear your perspective on the system handoff. I stared at it, then typed 4 words. I'm with a client and hit send. I wasn't being cruel. Just honest. They'd treated me like a relic until their shiny new version cracked. Now they were looking back, but I wasn't standing where they left me. Have you ever walked away quietly, only to have the very people who erased you come searching again? And when they did, were you already too far ahead to care? I didn't need to block their calls. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to keep building. And that's what I was doing on a newer system, with better partners and zero illusions. Because the most powerful comeback doesn't happen on stage. It happens when you've already moved on. I didn't announce anything, didn't update my LinkedIn. I didn't even tell the old team what I was working on. But the news found them anyway. Technova Strategic Systems had just signed a multi-million-dollar integration deal with 3 of Stratus's biggest legacy clients, quiet, clean, and painfully efficient. My name didn't appear in the headlines, but I didn't need it to. The real move came on a Tuesday. Stratus had called a quarterly strategy summit. They always held them in the 17th floor glass conference room with skyline views and espresso bars tucked into the corners like scenery for a staged power play. I hadn't been in that room for 6 months. Until I walked in this time as Technova's systems advisor. I wasn't alone. I was flanked by one of Technova's executive directors and the head of enterprise implementation. We were there for transition insights as part of a proposed vendor audit. Stratus had invited Technova without realizing I would be the one leading the session. Sienna was already in the room. She stood by the whiteboard. Sharpie in hand, mid-pitch. A vision plan. Color-coded, buzzword-loaded. Her voice faltered just slightly when she saw me. Elora Reed said from the head of the table, rising. Didn't realize you were consulting with Technova. I've been consulting with a lot of people, I said calmly. This one just happens to be relevant. Silence rippled. Nobody knew where to look. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't grandstand. I simply opened my folder and began outlining the compliance failures, integration flaws, and procedural oversights. I'd observed now as a neutral third party, Sienna kept quiet. So did Reed. Their power wasn't gone, but its shape had changed. It no longer came from confidence. It came from fear. Fear of what else I knew. After the session, Reed approached me near the elevators. You're doing this to make a point. No, I said, pressing the button. I'm doing this to make it work. I wasn't back. I was above. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I'd outgrown the battlefield. It started with a resignation. Vanessa, head of operations, turned in her notice on a Monday morning, clean professional 2 weeks. No drama. But anyone paying attention knew what it meant. She'd been with Stratus for nearly 10 years, handled crisis logistics, managed vendor transitions. She was the glue, quiet, unshakable. Her leaving wasn't just a loss. It was a message. Within 3 days, 2 more followed Luis. From back-end architecture, left for a cybersecurity firm in Austin. Then came Helena, client services lead, who moved to a competitor without even finishing out her notice. HR called it market churn. But inside the boardroom, the truth sounded different. People weren't jumping ship. They were evacuating. Still no one said my name. But I saw the board minutes. I saw the shift in tone, phrases like structural instability and talent retention, risk showing up where terms like vision and innovation used to sit. Sienna doubled down. She hosted a webinar for remaining staff titled The Path Forward, talked about resilience growth. New horizons, smiled too hard, blinked too much. Meanwhile, client service tickets tripled in volume. The back-end team, now cobbled together from contract workers and college hires, couldn't stabilize core functions. Predictive models failed. Clients grew frustrated. In private forums, familiar names began warning each other about growing concerns at Stratus. I didn't respond, didn't post, but I watched from my quiet desk at home, where I now consulted for 3 firms, including Technova. I ran diagnostics on integrations, reviewed system proposals, advised on expansion roadmaps. No late nights, no coffee-fueled damage control, just structure, clarity, and the satisfaction of building systems that didn't implode. Then late on a Thursday, I got a call from Vanessa. "They're asking questions," she said. "Who the board? They've noticed Sienna's metrics aren't matching up. And Reed, he's absent. Not officially, but he's stopped showing up to internal stand-ups. And there's a rumor they're prepping for a quiet leadership reset." I didn't say anything. "You think they'll reach out?" she asked. I glanced at the unread message in my inbox, marked urgent from Stratus's interim board chair. They already have, because the storm hadn't broken me. It had cleared the sky around me. It wasn't a whistleblower. It was a leak. An anonymous file sent to the press, copied to half the board, and buried in the metadata screenshots from a 2021 leadership retreat presentation labeled Talent Optimization. On slide 9, a bullet point read, "Eliminate legacy roles, EC resistance to culture shift." The initials weren't subtle. Neither was the intent. For months, the narrative had been natural transition. They called my departure a new chapter. But now it was clear it had been premeditated, a strategic removal. Not because I'd failed, but because I wasn't glossy enough for their rebrand. The story spread fast first through internal Slack threads. Then the industry blogosphere. One headline read, "Stratus under fire, founder-level contributor. Silently removed during restructure." I didn't comment. I didn't need to, because right behind that leak came a copy of an internal NDA signed by Reed and Sienna in the early phases of the leadership shift, outlining their intent to accelerate generational optics by replacing key senior roles with youth-forward representation. Translation: I was erased for being too seasoned, too stable, too much a reminder of what came before. But they forgot one detail. I had receipts, a legal folder time-stamped and quietly notarized that included my contributions to the company's proprietary security framework dating back to the early days of launch. I'd held off filing patents. Out of loyalty, out of trust. That trust was gone. My attorney filed the IP ownership notices that same week. Quietly, strategically. The documentation was clean. Elora Carter, listed as original creator and systems architect for 3 key data protection layers still used in Stratus's infrastructure. Within 72 hours, their legal team requested a private conversation. I declined. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was deliberate. Let the news circulate. Let clients ask hard questions. Let partners wonder what else had been buried under rebranding initiatives, and let Reed and Sienna sit with it. Not because I wanted to humiliate them, but because they needed to remember some foundations aren't meant to be painted over, they're meant to be understood and respected. The board called a closed session. No press. No recording. Just 15 people in a room with a company unraveling at its edges. I wasn't invited, not officially. But halfway through the meeting, as arguments built around Sienna's leadership, one of the directors pulled out a thick folder. Inside copies of the intellectual property filings diagrams, source code lineage, all tied back to one name. Mine. The room went quiet. "What are we using that we don't own one?" Director asked. "Technically, we still have operating rights," someone muttered. "But not protections," the board chair clarified. "Not if the creator decides to revoke them." That was the shift. Not rage, not scandal. Uncertainty. The kind that makes investors hesitate. That makes acquisition partners revise their terms. Technova's interest in a merger hadn't disappeared, but they'd started asking pointed questions. Not just about financials, but about stability. Who actually understood the systems? Who built them? Who could be trusted to steward them during a transition? And then came the formal proposal. Not from Stratus. From Technova. A structured merger offer contingent on the establishment of a neutral transitional advisory panel to oversee integration. The condition I would chair it, not as an employee, not as a returning executive, as an autonomous consultant backed by Technova's acquisition terms and legal framework. I didn't blink, I accepted. My first act wasn't dramatic. I didn't fire anyone, didn't clean house. I simply redrew the map. Split functions by competency, not politics. Reinstated system documentation protocols. Froze all front-end changes until back-end compliance was complete. Sent a memo to every department head. Effective immediately. All system modifications require my review. Not for control, for coherence. There were no applause, no headlines. But in the silence that followed, I felt the shift. Reed stepped down within the week, citing strategic exhaustion. Sienna was reassigned to an innovation sandbox, safe far from anything critical. And me, I didn't move into a corner office. I didn't want it. My seat was at the center, not of status, but of structure. I wasn't rebuilding the company. I was rebalancing it. Quietly, precisely. Without bitterness, because power isn't just about titles. It's about knowing what holds the walls up and being the only one who still remembers how they were built. I didn't move back into my old office. Someone asked me about it once. An intern maybe 2 weeks in. He said he thought I'd want the window view again. The corner desk, my nameplate. I just smiled. Some offices are for building things. Others are for remembering what you built. Instead, I worked from the strategy room. No title on the door, just whiteboards, fiber optics, and a lock. Only I had the code for. We didn't rebuild Stratus to what it had been. We rebuilt it into what it should have been. Functional, adaptable, and egoless. There was no press release, no ceremony. But the board quietly extended my contract for another year. Then another. Vanessa returned full-time as COO. Luis rejoined on the systems side under a hybrid CTO model. We didn't talk about loyalty. We talked about systems that respect the people who hold them up. In the spring, Phoenix Capital finalized the acquisition. Not a hostile takeover, but a steady handoff. The transition team included 3 of my former analysts, a new security director I'd personally mentored, and 1 junior staffer from the operations department who had once stayed late to fix a reporting error. No one else even noticed I invited her to join the audit team. She cried in the hallway. Said no one had ever noticed her work before. I just nodded. You did it right. That's all that counts. That summer I stepped back. Officially, I didn't vanish. I became what I had always been. At my best, the steady voice behind the systems, not the face in the photo. My laptop still hums quietly. Each morning on the kitchen counter, right next to the same chipped mug from our first year. I log in, check the logs, skim the tickets. Not because I have to, because I care. Sometimes I watch the dashboards run smooth and silent and think, this is the reward, not the money, not the recognition, the continuity, the fact that the thing I built still runs even without my name at the top of the org chart. A few weeks ago, I got an email from Celeste Ramos, subject line, Legacy. Yours, she wrote. You didn't just fix the system, you redefined what leadership looks like when no one's clapping. Thank you for reminding us that power doesn't need noise, it needs clarity. I didn't reply, but I saved it. Some legacies aren't loud, they're coded in silence. Have you ever been the one quietly keeping everything running until the moment you weren't there, and suddenly everything felt the gap? Tell me your story, I'm listening. On Monday morning, I had 48 missed calls from the office. 3 weeks earlier, they quietly withheld 6 months of my overtime pay just to fund a luxury family vacation for my boss in the Bahamas. I didn't make noise. I sent a single file. And then, everything collapsed in silence. Have you ever been erased after everything you gave? No firing, no thank you, Just gone. If you've ever lived through that, stay with me until the end of this story. I'm the kind of person who arrives before the clock does. At 7:55 a.m., the sixth floor was still empty, save for the ticking sound of the wall clock in accounting. That clock had been off by exactly a minute and a half for 3 years. No one ever fixed it. Except me. I noticed. My briefcase, old, fraying at the handle, sat quietly on my desk. I wiped it down every Friday evening like a ritual. Maybe it was silly, but it made me feel like I was in control of something, even if it was just a bag. This was month 6 of me working overtime. No one forced me. I volunteered. Because I believed in something called recognition. My boss, Mr. Quinn, had the smile of a fair father. Once he told me, "Lena, you're not loud. I appreciate that." I thought it was a compliment. I worked in strategic finance. No glamour, no spotlight. It was the kind of role people avoided. Too many spreadsheets, not enough credit. But I liked numbers. Numbers didn't lie. They were either right or wrong. And in that world, I always knew where I stood. I used to think, if I worked hard enough, someone would notice. So I stayed late. Every Monday to Friday. There were weeks I walked out of the building long after the janitor had finished, long after the hallway lights flickered off. The security guard would call my name like he was counting the last soul off a sinking ship. I told myself, just a little more. Quarter's almost over. The calendar behind my screen was a battlefield, full of red ink, scratched out weekends. Not because I was resting, but because I was working. By month 6, I wasn't even tired. I was hopeful. In the quarterly meeting, Mr. Quinn publicly thanked me for her silent commitment. The room clapped. I smiled. I thought, this is it. This is the season I finally get that raise. I didn't know then that applause is sometimes a silent goodbye. A week later, I received a system email. It wasn't meant for me. The subject line, Executive Leadership Family Vacation, Q2 Expense Breakdown. I wasn't in the main recipient list, just CC'd, accidentally. But my eyes landed on something that made my stomach drop. Overtime payroll, reallocated to Executive Family Benefit Fund, Resort, Bahamas. My name wasn't in the email body, but my hours were. I clicked the file with fingers that trembled, not from anger, but confusion. It didn't make sense. Why was my overtime listed under family vacation expenses? For a moment, I wondered, did I do something wrong? Or did I just believe too much? At exactly 8 a.m., the office wall clock ticked forward. It was still wrong, off by a minute and a half, but for the first time, it felt perfectly accurate. I didn't confront anyone. Not at first. Instead, I reread the email like it might suddenly rewrite itself. Maybe the label was wrong. Maybe overtime payroll was some internal code I didn't understand. So I did what I knew best. I double-checked. I pulled my last 6 pay slips. Then I opened my work tracker, cross-referencing every hour, every project note, every approval email. And there it was. The overtime entries were missing. Not delayed, not processing, gone. For 6 straight months, I'd been logging in weekends, staying until the cleaners turned off the hallway lights, finishing reconciliations no one else wanted to touch. I was told we were short-staffed, told I was essential. But apparently, I wasn't essential enough to get paid. I printed out the slips. Not because I needed proof, but because holding the paper made it feel real. The next day, I went to accounting. Cheryl at payroll wouldn't meet my eyes. "We're still catching up with Q2 processing," she said, fingers twitching near her mouse. "There were adjustments this cycle." "What kind of adjustments?" I asked. She shrugged. "Higher-ups, budget reshuffling. It's all above us now." I nodded slowly. Not angry, not yet. Just aware. I walked toward the executive floor. The meeting room was closed, blinds drawn. I tapped the glass. The receptionist leaned over and mouthed, "Sorry, they're mid-call." That was the new line lately. Always mid-call. Always too busy for people like me. By Thursday, a strange shift settled in the office. My name wasn't called in the morning huddles. A file I'd created was sent out under someone else's initials. I was left off a calendar invite for a planning meeting. I only knew it happened when I saw the recap email, one I was CC'd on with a note that said, "Assumed you were unavailable." That was when I realized something quieter was happening, something colder. They weren't just ignoring me, they were phasing me out. Every small exclusion carried a message. You don't belong here anymore. And still, I didn't speak. Not to HR, not to Cheryl, not to Mr. Quinn. I sat with it, let it settle, let the sting work its way deep. Because somewhere between the budget line and the blindfold, I started to blame myself. Maybe I wasn't clear enough. Maybe I should have spoken up sooner. Maybe I really was just background. I had always told myself I didn't need to be seen. I just needed to be respected. But the truth was, I wanted both. I always had. That Friday, I stayed late. Not for work, but for quiet. I sat at my desk, the only sound coming from the janitor's vacuum humming down the hallway. I opened a blank document and typed the title. Discrepancy Report. Overtime withholding Q1 Q2. Then I closed it. Didn't save. Not yet. Instead, I opened my phone, scrolled through the company's internal directory, paused at one name. Someone I hadn't spoken to in months, but who had once told me, "If you ever feel something's off, call me. Don't wait." I didn't call. I turned the phone face down and left it there, because I wasn't ready to be heard. Not yet. By Monday morning, I was ready to leave. Not literally, but something inside me had started packing. And then it happened. A single-line email from Mr. Quinn hit my inbox at 7:12 a.m. Let's clarify the overtime misunderstanding. Drop by my office at 10:15. No greeting, no apology, just an appointment, disguised as a resolution. I stared at it. I didn't breathe. Part of me wanted to believe it. Maybe he'd realized the mistake. Maybe he was embarrassed. Maybe it would all be fixed. I looked at the coffee I'd just poured, still steaming, still untouched. I wasn't sure if I was more afraid of being dismissed again or of being seen. At 10:13, I walked past Cheryl in payroll. She didn't smile, didn't even blink. That kind of silence said more than words. Mr. Quinn's office was quiet when I knocked. He looked up from his laptop, motioned me inside with a flick of his pen. "Lena," he said, like he was reintroducing me to myself. "This whole overtime thing, it's gotten noisy, hasn't it?" I didn't answer. He continued, his voice slipping into that managerial calm. "There was a miscommunication, not intentional. These things happen, quarter-end shuffles, executive reallocations. It's not personal." I wanted to ask, if it wasn't personal, why was it always people like me who paid for it? He slid a folder across the desk. "We're processing a correction. You'll receive the adjustment by July 15th, pending clearance." I flipped it open. A simple sheet, numbers typed neatly, a date underlined. 3 weeks away. No acknowledgement of the 6 months I'd already waited. "So nothing now?" I asked. He smiled, like he was trying to soothe a child. "Trust the process. We'll make it right." Eventually, that word again. The same word people use when they want you to stop asking questions but still keep working. I left without a word. Not yes, not no, just left. At my desk, the coffee had gone cold. I picked it up, held it for warmth I didn't feel. The window behind me caught my reflection, shoulders hunched, eyes uncertain. Then came another email. From HR this time. "Please confirm receipt of your updated compensation schedule. Reply to acknowledge." Acknowledge. Like they needed my signature to validate the delay. I didn't click anything. Instead, I sat back and watched the office pulse around me. My name wasn't called in the team meeting. A financial model I had built was presented by someone else, with their initials on the bottom slide. I wasn't just being overlooked, I was being erased. And the worst part? I was starting to accept it. That night, I sat on my couch, the city light filtering in like ghosts. I opened my notes app, typed 3 words. Not yet real. I didn't know if I was talking about the correction or myself. Then, a message popped up on Slack from Brandon in legal. Hey, flagging that you're not listed on the Q3 strategy doc. Was that intentional? Another exclusion. Another way. I bookmarked it, didn't respond, just stared at the timestamp like it might give me answers. My phone buzzed with a notification from LinkedIn. 3 new roles matching your profile. I didn't click, not yet. Instead, I poured another cup of coffee. This one, I let go cold on purpose. Because I knew I was about to start documenting, not just the lies they told me, but the ones I told myself. Have you ever believed a promise? Just enough to stay, just long enough to hurt more when it broke? Not shattered by shouting or slammed doors, but slowly, through silence, delays, polite apologies? If you've been there, share it below. Because sometimes, the way they erase us says everything about how they valued us. By Friday morning, I knew exactly what to look for. I logged into the shared drive and opened the Q3 strategic brief, the file I had spent 37 hours building over 2 weekends across 3 sleepless nights. When it loaded, I scanned straight to the bottom, prepared by E. Dougherty. I didn't even blink. I just felt it, like a wind that pushes open a door you didn't realize was already unlocked. I kept reading, my formatting, my phrasing, my projections. The slide I color-coded to make margins clearer for stakeholders. That was mine. But my name wasn't in anywhere. There was no email, no update, no explanation. Not even a thank you. Just silence. I walked past Quinn's office. He was inside laughing with someone. I didn't pause. I already knew. At 3:14 p.m., he walked by my desk. Didn't stop. Just said, almost absently, "Quiet excellence, Lena. That's what I always admired about you." I looked up. Our eyes met. There was no admiration in his, just calculation. It wasn't a compliment. It was a warning. I nodded once. A reflex, nothing more. At 5:03, I shut my laptop. Packed slowly. Didn't rush. Didn't linger. Just moved like someone who had finally accepted the ending. That evening, I poured a glass of wine, but didn't drink it. I let it sit on the table, untouched. The condensation slid down the glass like it wanted to vanish without being noticed. I opened the folder I'd created 3 weeks earlier. Discrepancy report. Overtime withholding, Q1, Q2. Everything was still there. 6 payroll cycles, logged hours from email approvals, screenshots of team rosters, payment structures before and after reallocations. I cross-referenced the HR system timestamps again. They matched. Then I scrolled to the bottom of the file and added 1 new line. Not an error. A strategy. I hit save, for the first time. There's a moment when grief stops needing an audience. It just becomes a mirror. And as I stared into mine, dim kitchen light, tired eyes, glass of wine untouched, I didn't see a victim. I saw someone who had learned their enemy's language, and I wasn't fluent in anger. I was fluent in silence, in evidence, in structure, in exit plans. Because the hardest part wasn't realizing I was expendable. It was realizing I had allowed it. That every late night I didn't log. Every win I let someone else announce. Every smile I gave in place of a question. It wasn't loyalty. It was silence I had offered up like currency. And now, I was done trading. I opened a new note, typed, "I don't need to be heard. I just need to understand." Then I set the wine glass in the sink, still full, and turned off the light. I stopped expecting apologies. I stopped waiting for corrections. By Monday morning, I wasn't looking for justice anymore. I was collecting facts. No more hoping, no more checking inboxes, no more rereading Slack messages trying to decode tone. That phase was over. I came into the office at 7:38 a.m. I didn't speak to anyone. I logged in, plugged in my USB, and began the download. Every document with my initials in the metadata, every payroll report from the last 9 months, every time-stamped record that proved I had been present, accountable, and, most of all, used. I printed everything in grayscale, then redacted names in black ink, except my own. I wasn't keeping receipts. I was building a record. That afternoon, I opened my planner and started crossing out blocks of time, meetings I'd attend but mentally withdraw from, deliverables I'd finish but not polish, calls I'd join but stay on mute. It wasn't burnout. It was design. By Thursday, Quinn's tone changed. He stopped praising me, stopped looking my way in meetings, started asking my direct reports for updates on projects I led. I let him. I didn't push back. I didn't reassert authority, because they were too busy watching me disappear to realize I was watching them build my replacement. On a faulty foundation. I updated the discrepancy report each evening, quietly. On Wednesday, I added 4 new screenshots. On Thursday, I clipped the call recording where Quinn used the phrase, executive budget flex, the same phrase Cheryl had whispered over coffee 2 weeks earlier. I organized everything into 3 folders, internal only, for HR if I ever chose to go that route, external counsel, just in case, public copy, the version written not for lawyers but for witnesses. Each folder had a printed label and a backup on the cloud, locked under a password no one but me could guess. It wasn't paranoia, it was clarity. Friday morning, I received a calendar invite. Leadership Summit, Bahamas Recap Strategy. I wasn't on the original list. Someone must have added me out of habit. I declined the invite and typed 3 words in the comment box. Unavailable. Observing silence. No one replied. At 4:47 p.m., I watched the office start to empty. Laughter in the hallway. Someone passed around cupcakes. Quinn stood in the kitchen holding a wine glass. To Q3, he said. No one toasted back, just half smiles and tired eyes. He caught me glancing through the glass wall and lifted the glass slightly. I nodded, didn't smile, then walked back to my desk. He still thought I was the quiet one. He had no idea I was already gone. I opened my laptop, attached the first folder to an encrypted drive, and labeled the subject, Reallocation Case, Supporting Documents, Q1, Q3. But I didn't send it, not yet. Instead, I closed my laptop, slid the USB into my coat pocket, and left the building. Not rushed, not dramatic, just complete. At home, I poured a glass of water and stood by the window. I looked down at the street where everything moved in rhythms, cars changing lights, people checking phones, joggers pacing like they had somewhere urgent to go. I didn't need urgency, I needed precision. The truth wasn't heavy anymore. It was organized. I sat down and opened the black planner one last time, crossed out the final date of that month, then wrote beneath it, Final Quiet Week, Beginning of Control. I didn't need an audience. I needed a margin. And now, I had one. I didn't need a perfect moment. I just needed Monday. At 8:09 a.m., I uploaded the public copy of the discrepancy report into the shared drive labeled Company Archives Internal Use Only. Not hidden, not announced, just placed. The subject line was clear. Q1, Q3 payroll anomalies, compiled for stakeholder review. I copied 2 people. No CC, no BCC. 1, the company's biggest client. 2, the external audit firm we used every June. Then I logged out. I didn't stick around for the reaction. Instead, I went to a coffee shop 4 blocks away, sat near the window, ordered a plain Americano, watched the rain start without warning. At 9:22, the first call came in. Quinn. I didn't answer. By 10:05, there were 8 missed calls. By 11:47, 48. I turned the phone over and slid it into my coat pocket. Let the silence talk now. Back at the office, The atmosphere shifted like pressure before a storm. The meeting room where Quinn usually led vision alignment was locked. The glass walls revealed raised voices, whiteboard markings being wiped clean. Papers passed quickly and without eye contact. Brandon from legal messaged me. "What did you just do?" I replied. "Filed a report, nothing more." He didn't write back. Around noon, the shared drive locked. Access to company archives was restricted, but the file had already been downloaded. Twice. That afternoon, I received a calendar cancellation. Bahamas recap strategy, postponed. I didn't smile, but I did exhale. An hour later, an all-hands email went out from HR. "We are temporarily suspending all non-critical travel and executive benefits for Q4 pending a third-party review." They didn't name names, but they didn't have to. Quinn didn't show up to the end-of-day meeting. Rumor said he was on a call with legal counsel. Another said the client had requested a private conference call without him present. The numbers started falling too. KPIs that had been massaged all quarter were now flagged by the audit firm. A chart from my original deck appeared in the client-facing presentation, this time with my name still stripped, but with my watermark intact. They knew now. Everyone did. They didn't say it, but they knew. I walked out at 5:02, same time as usual. No victory dance, no speech, just a pause at the elevator, long enough to hear the vacuum hum in the hallway. I didn't need to watch them fall. That part wasn't mine. My part was the silence that made the collapse echo louder. The first Monday of October came quietly. No storm, no headlines, just a calendar notification at 7:00 a.m. Final day. End of contractual obligations. No one else marked it. No balloons, no HR send-off, no memo from the top. That silence? It was the greatest gift they'd ever given me. I arrived at the office exactly at 8:00. My badge still worked, for now. The halls were quieter than usual. Maybe people knew, maybe they didn't. It didn't matter. I walked to my desk one last time. The plants were already gone. So was the ceramic mug I used for 6 years, the one with the faded quote, "What you tolerate, you accept." All that remained was my chair, my screen, and a closed drawer. Inside it was my black planner. The last page had been filled 2 days earlier. I placed it flat on the desk, then opened a new notebook. Page 1 still blank. I didn't write anything yet. I just wanted to feel the weight of clean space. At 8:47, I sent one email. To myself. Subject: Lena, October forward. No attachment. Just 3 lines in the body. You kept your word. You stayed silent long enough to be undeniable. And now, you are free. I logged out. For the final time. Then I stood. No announcement, no speech, no eyes on me. Just one slow breath. In, out. And then, I walked away. Outside, the morning air was crisp. Light filtered through the clouds, like it had a reason to arrive late. I passed the lobby without looking back. The security guard waved. I waved back. We didn't need to say anything. At home, I poured myself a glass of wine. Not to celebrate, not to forget, just to acknowledge. It stood on the windowsill, catching the morning sun. I didn't rush to drink it. I was already full. I picked up the new notebook and wrote, "This was never about winning. This was about remembering who I was before they tried to erase me." Sometimes freedom doesn't come wrapped in applause or public recognition. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet click, your final log out. A walk away that no one sees but that changes everything. I didn't burn the building. I just left a light on, to remind them I was never the one in the dark. Have you ever chosen yourself, not in anger, not in pride, but in peace? That kind of exit where no one claps, but you still know it was the most powerful thing you've ever done? If you've ever walked away not to prove anything, but because you finally knew your worth, I want to hear your story. Because silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the last word.